Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Stories That Inspire Us, the author series. Today, I have on an amazing guest, and before I formally introduce him, I do have a copy of his book, and he is the author along with Janice Harper. And by the way, Janice spells her name wrong. Oh, only kidding, just a side note, we spell it differently. Not a Real Enemy, the true story of a Hungarian Jewish man's fight for freedom. I am so honored and privileged to welcome to the Stories podcast, Dr. Robert Wolf. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the invitation. Very grateful and blessed. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. As we were chit-chatting a little bit before we hit the live button, I mentioned something to you, and as I read authors' books that come on, sometimes I read the epilogue, but for some reason, I felt that I had to wait to read it. And I'll explain that in just a moment. This book was absolutely fascinating, and taken from back of your book, page-turning tale of suspense, tragedy, comedy, and ultimately triumph. Now, obviously, this is such a powerful tribute, such a compelling narrative. When you sat down to write your book and thinking back on all these conversations with your dad, what was one thing? I'm sure there were several things, but what was one thing that you took from his story that you felt, I have to write this book?
It's a great question. What a great question that is. It's hard to say. There were so many. I guess the big thing is that the message was clear from the very beginning of my dad's story, what he was trying to say and why he chronicled his past. I guess I have to talk about the history of the book to kind of answer that question, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So the book covers, it's Hungary. It's the history of Hungary light, as you know, and it covers from World War I, even a little bit pre-World War I Hungary, all the way to the end of the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. My parents, my dad was a multiple escape artist, as you know, multiple times. He even missed an escape. It's another great story to share. He went to the wrong train station, and everybody who made that escape got arrested, including his medical school classmate, which befuddled his career. And it was always in the back of my dad's head every time he tried to escape. He was concerned about not being able to practice medicine in the fear of being caught. But anyway, so 1970s, my mom and dad chronicled and did his autobiography, and they wrote the stories as though they'd happened the previous day. They were clear, they were lucid, and they spent a lot of time with it. I could tell, and they went from paper and pencil to typewriter to computer. And they talked a lot more about the Holocaust and the history of it, at least with me, my second half of my life, not so much the first half, because it was all high school and pre-med and medical and residency and fellowship and career and having family. So I didn't really think that much about it throughout most of that time. So fast forward to 1997, my dad passes away, unfortunately. Seems like a whole lifetime ago, it was many years ago. And then my mom passed away in 2016. And when that happened, a historian friend from my mom's hometown, Kim Parr, a friend of my mom's and a good friend of mine, I'm proud to say, handed me now the stories in the disc. And she says to me, you've got to look at this. You've got to read this. And I really didn't think much of it at the time. I was so busy with my mom's affairs. It took about a year to take care of that. And then I decided to retire for a year and just kind of walk away from everything, to do a little travel. And then a friend of mine out of Michigan, who I still work with, he asked me to come back to work from home, nothing major, just to help out with some x-rays and ultrasound out of his imaging center in Michigan. And I said, why not? I'm not really doing that much. And so it was only part-time, and I always like to help out the team. And nationwide, I believe there's still a major shortage of radiologists, which is what I do for a living, but never mind doctors. And I think that's going to probably get worse over time, unfortunately. But not to digress, but working with him brought me to the book. So as a radiologist, on the left side, we have our work list, and on the right side, we have our images, and we dictate into the computer. So So since I started working, the disc sort of summoned me. I mean, it sort of called me like Superman's kryptonite, if you can believe that. A little corny, but that's kind of what happened. So I loaded the disc up, and between cases, I started reading my dad's autobiography, this time on a computer screen, and printed up. And I decided, wow, these stories are really amazing. I did remember his first escape from over all these years, and I had that picture in the back of my head over all these years, but I didn't remember a lot of the other stories that he told, the other escapes, and all the cloak and dagger stories, and arguing with armed Russian soldiers, and wearing strange clothes, women's clothes in some cases, hiding in unusual places, forged papers, and twists and turns that they're so unreal. I mean, people that you think are going to be your friend turn out to be your enemy, and vice versa. People you think that are going to be your enemies sometimes turn out to be your friends. So you never know. And in the backdrop was survival. And in the backdrop was the story and the lessons and the perils of anti-Semitism. And I just went with it. It was just so emotionally charging and so heartfelt that I couldn't stop doing it. So here we are, 20 edits later, 5 years later, 2 or 3 different versions of the book. And Janice did a wonderful job redoing the book and making it a really special story, special biography, rather than just point A to point B to point C. I can't thank her enough times. And then Amsterdam Publishers, thank you, Lisbeth Hink, Amsterdam Publishers. This is all they do, is Holocaust-related memoir and history. They stretch it out a little bit, like they did with me, since it covers communist Hungary too. But here we are, so 5 years later, and now the book's finally released, and I'm slowly trying to tell people about it. I've got some big talks coming up the next couple of weeks. I've got the Illinois Holocaust Museum, which I'm proud to say that's August 31st. That's by reservation only, and I've been posting a lot about that on social media. And then a week later, I have a big hometown public library speech, which I'm looking forward to. That's going to be, and that's a refurbished library that they just finished a few months ago. So I'm looking forward to being there, seeing a lot of friends, a lot of my parents' friends, neighbors. The word, if anybody in my hometown doesn't know about that talk, then they're on Mars or something, because it's out there. So, and I'm looking forward to that too. So hopefully we get a good turnout. That'll be, and the one in the Holocaust Museum one is actually going to be a book talk, plus a Q&A, sort of a fireside chat type of thing, and then a signage, is a book signing, and then the one in Michigan will be a book talk, question answer, meet and greet, and signing. So both exciting programs. I've been invited to the Houston Holocaust Museum. That's next spring. I'm slowly getting invited to different temples, Chabad's here in Florida, and hopefully over time elsewhere. I'm in talks with the Michigan Holocaust Museum. They want to wait till after the high holidays. I'm on the list at the New York Jewish Heritage Museum in New York City, which would be really an exciting place to go to speak. I would really be honored. And one of my colleagues at Amsterdam Publishers just did a 2-day book signing at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. I'm proud to say my book's on sale there. And my grandson was just there a few weeks ago and showed me the pictures of him holding the book and told his staff about me. And it was really a nice, and I would like to, someday maybe get to do a book talk there. I'd be very honored and privileged if they ever were to ask me. So
Wow.
and I've donated quite a few books to different, the Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, the Imperial War Museum in London. I just donated a book, several Holocaust museums here in Florida, and more to come. More to donate, more to sell. The idea is to try to share the message, share the story, and in the meantime, help curtail anti-Semitism and racism in general, not just anti-Semitism, all types of racism and hate, of course.
Wow. And first of all, thank you so much for all of that detailed information, because it just shows the extent, really, and of the impact of your story, of your parents' story, starting, of course, with your grandparents. And one thing, of course, so many things about your book really stood out to me, but excuse me, what I kind of gathered reading each chapter, and some chapters I reread, get your tissues ready. That's all I'm going to say. And my eyes were just welling up, and I got to grab a tissue myself, because it really got to me in such a way. Like, I felt I was viewing history under a different lens. But one thing, of course, that stood out to me throughout the whole book was hope. That one word, simple to say, but in my estimation, it was the hope was very deep. The hope was always there. And it just struck me in such a way, like I said, I thought I was viewing history right before my eyes.
It's so amazing that you say that, because in my book talk, which is only about 15 or 20 minutes, hope is a topic that I bring up, and despair, hope, integrity, determination are four, and I hope that people, when I'm in their neighborhood, are interested in hearing the book talk and learning more about the story. But hope is definitely, it's right, it's prevail. I mean, I was just thinking the other day, we all have a light at the end of the tunnel, like somebody getting out of jail, God forbid, or somebody's bar mitzvah or a wedding or having a baby or something. We all have this light at the end of the tunnel, getting a new job. But I wonder where the light at the end of the tunnel was for my dad and his friend Frank, and even my mom. You're running and running and running. You're on the run for months. You're either trying to escape, you're escaping, you're hiding. And where is that light at the end of the tunnel? And then when the communists take over, the Hungarians think they're relieved by a new regime, but it turns out not to be. Short of being corralled and shipped off to be murdered, the Jews were not treated so much better by the communists as well. So I don't know how when you say hope, you can say hope of the hopeless. It reminds me of the slaves in Egypt. I mean, how did 400 years? I mean, where is the light at the end of the tunnel? And my dad did find it. So, and that all ties in with integrity and determination, of course, as well. And another big message besides the anti-Semitism is what happened to my dad could happen to any one of us. I mean, it could be a bad neighbor, a bad local government, a bad federal government, a foreign government, an act of nature, but it could be something, a local disaster that could make any one of us in that same type of perilous situation where you don't know where to go, you don't know where to hide, you're running from life, you're running from people, and you don't know where you're going. And you can feel that in my dad's stories. And that was a big motivator for me too, is that you could actually put yourself in my dad's place and say, Jesus, could happen to me, it could happen to any one of us.
Certainly. And the history aspect of it, I feel as though, for instance, when I was in high school, learning about history, it's like, okay, kind of in some ways going through the motions, but really such an appreciation for the history behind the segment of this book. In fact, another thing that struck out to me, and I had to read this one a couple times, was about the auxiliary labor service, because your grandfather thought that he was going into service, but in actuality, they weren't considered captives, but they were.
Well, they're okay. So my dad's father was a captain on a ship in World War I and the Black Sea, and it was a Red Cross ship, if I remember correctly. So that was during World War I. Mm-hmm. So he was a local hero. He never fought, but he worked on. But they were attacked, and there's not a lot about it. But that's what my dad's father did. He was a cat, and then he was retired from the military, and then became a dentist ultimately, and had difficulty getting his practice going, mostly because of money, and sometimes because he was Jewish, and all the stories are all in there about that. But my dad was taken to an auxiliary labor service. It was a paramilitary service was another term for it, and the Jews were deemed not qualified or not loyal enough, not respected enough to actually carry weapons and fight against their enemies. So they were put to slave labor. They were taken to slave labor camps and marching all over the country, starving most of the time, squalid conditions to live in, shelters for animals, literally, leaking roofs, muddy floors, and just having to live for months like that. And yet they were attacked too by Russian planes, for example. There was the story of when there was a plane attack, and all the men were at risk, whether they were armed or not. So, and then there was some sad stories about some of his fellow laborers. One was a conductor who lost his hearing, and I don't want to tell too many of the stories, but it was a very sad.
Right.
He lost his hearing, and one of his fellow members died from such attack. So they were not allowed to. They had their yellow bands and their silly hats, which I love talking about because it's so humiliating they had to wear these hats and the bands, and just like we all know about the yellow stars and the tattoos that people had to have, and it was no better. So sometimes the work they had to do in these auxiliary camps was just meaningless. They were just digging up rocks or moving things from point A to point B just to keep them busy. And sometimes it was more perilous things like adding or removing landmines and digging wells, digging ditches to place those landmines, and building airports and roads and whatever else they could come up with. So hours and hours and hours, dawn to dusk, very little food, a lot of walking. They had to walk to get tools. They had to walk to get their meals, and very, very, very difficult time for them. And not only that, verbally abused and physically abused, and sometimes tortured and sometimes threatened. If you remember the lining them up and threatening to kill every X number of men, and counting down of the men, and by some drunk colonel or drunk officer that's got them under their. They can do anything they want there. And another big point, we talk about this in the speech, is the less nice the guards are to the laborers, the better they look. So they're fear of their own circumstances if they're not nasty to the laborers, if they're not. So all that is pointed across, but it's sad, and it's not much you can do. But in the end, having to do that saved his life and saved his friend Frank and some of his other friends that he shared the stories with, because they were useful. They were young men who could actually work, and in the end, they might have been killed because there were death marches reported. And my dad and his friend Frank were in fear of them. And my dad was hospitalized once or twice too with a foot. He had a foot issue, a foot infection, and he had food poisoning. And those diseases, those issues might have actually saved his life, because he'd been away from his squadron for a while, and then returned back from the hospital. And finally, on a march with his friend Frank, decides to escape for the first time, and that's his by far his most exciting escape. But they're all really exciting and they're all fascinating. But that one you can put yourself in his place and really picture yourself and say that's when people say that they read this and they say, wow, this alone, just this little chapter could be made into a movie, for example. So, and
Oh my gosh,
maybe
absolutely.
someday it will. I mean, it's not the only one. Escaping in front of Nazi headquarters in Budapest, that's amazing. And then my dad's risk tolerance just kind of kept going up over time, because his whole life was risky. Everything he did entailed risk. So by the time they escaped finally out of Hungary in 1956, and he found out why he was not a real enemy, and read about it, and that was a risky endeavor too. His risk tolerance was just through the roof. And for most of us in the United States and the free world, I don't know how I could handle all that, what my dad went through. I don't know how I could handle all that adversity and not end up with PTSD, which neither of my parents really had. They were educators. They were pretty open about what happened, and not everybody can do that. And so my dad's and mom's friends and neighbors and relatives were lucky that they could share the stories and the history. And here we are. I'm continuing that. I guess that's my charge now, and at least the last 5 years. And I have kids and grandkids to share with, and hopefully they will educate others about it. And they all support the book. And ultimately, besides the book being in talks and museums and libraries, I would like the book to be taught in the classroom, because I think that anti-Semitism and racism and just about everything we're taught is taught at home and early. So we need to educate the adults, but we have to have the adults and the families, the nuclear family, be cohesive and spend more time teaching kids about tolerance and acceptance.
So true. Thank you so much for sharing that. As you were reading, as you were reading on the disc before you wrote your book, and you're going through your dad's all of his escapes, what was something that really stood out to you? As obviously you said that he was always taking risks, and what was something that stuck out to you, like, oh my God, I can't believe he did this? Like, what did that feel like for you as his son to read about those escapes, and then probably to hear stories from him about it?
It's really not the dad that I know. I mean, because it's a whole different lifetime. I mean, my dad he's free in the United States. He's practicing OBGYN, as you might have seen in the epilogue. That's the happy ending, is that my dad, and certainly it's certainly redemption, that he got to deliver probably about 10,000 babies in the Detroit area. Clearly redemption after everything he went through. I mean, OBGYN was his favorite specialty, not mine. I'm a radiologist, but he loved it, and he would have worked till the day he died. So whatever my dad as a young man was different than my dad. And the thing is about my dad's demeanor, you would never know what he had gone through. After the way he was jovial, he was jolly, he liked to work, he was nice to the nurses, he loved his patients loved him. I'm still getting nice notes from his patients regarding the book, and I hope a lot of them show up at the talk in my hometown. But also you can feel the cold when he's running. You can feel the fear. You can hear the dogs barking. You can feel the thistle, being stuck in the thistle and with the thorns and the bleeding. The way he described it is the way we try to purvey it, the description, and you can actually feel what he went through. So, and I thought you were going to ask me in the middle of that. I mean, his escapes, you're rooting for him. Yeah, get out. You're almost there. You get out. You're rooting for him as your hero, and he makes it, and then he makes it, and it's just, the miracles are unbelievable. It's one after another. But in between, when you read about the tragedy that happened to his parents and the friends, and how just about his whole hometown was wiped out, and how he went back to a hometown that was just not the same after the war. Not only not having your parents around, but not having your own home. You've got to find a place to live. And he knocks on the door at his own home and sees nothing there that he recognizes, and a new family's moved in, and of course they don't know who he is. And then he has to get a search warrant, which is a miracle that he even did that. And there were no cell phones, there were no legal teams and lawyers, and no going viral. It was just your word against somebody else's. And if you're lucky, you would have a sympathetic officer to help you look for your things. Unfortunately, most of my dad's belongings and his parents' belongings were missing in action after he finally got to go home. And then even months after that, he finally found out the whereabouts of his parents and what happened with them by an eyewitness at Auschwitz. So that part is heavy. That part is, when people say they can't put the book down, that's the part of the book that I have to put down. And when I was working on the book, I had to walk away sometimes for a day or two, even a week, and just kind of absorb what I was reading and realizing, that's my family. These are the grandparents that I never met. And other people's grandparents. There were 500,000 Jews were killed in World War II from Hungary, and millions of Jewish soldiers fought for the U.S. Against the Allies during World War II. So, including my mom's boyfriend. After the fact, after my dad had passed away, she had a boyfriend down here in Florida, and he came from Hungary to the United States before World War II and went back and fought in Europe for the U.S. So a lot of great stories. But 500,000, and Hungarian history is not as well known, like Lithuania, Hungary, Albania, not as much exposure about World War II history, and let alone the Hungarian Revolution, where 3,000 people died. But everybody knows about, of course, Normandy and Pearl Harbor and the fights in the Pacific, and of course England and Germany, but not so much Hungary and the Czechoslovakia, Romania, the smaller countries. So I think I did the country a service by explaining what happened there, and hopefully I'm doing humanity a service over time by just getting people to slow down on the hate and slow down on the racism. So, but that's another emotion you can feel is why is everybody so against my dad and his family just because he's Jewish, just because they were talented people, they were good to the community, there was no reason for that. It was just it was appalling whatever they had to go through. So a lot of emotions, no doubt about it, when you go through this you do the story and you redo it. But there's no sugarcoating in this book, as you know. There's nothing, right. No punches pulled. So
no, and exactly, and I appreciate your keeping true, obviously, to the whole aspect of the story, and of course, changing names where certain characters came into play. So now you've written your book, you're going through your dad's stories, recalling these memories. You write the book, you get the book back from your publisher, you're holding the book in your hands. What did that feel like?
You would think, you'd think you have these big waves of ecstasy, and I guess at first you sort of do, but now I'm just busier. Now all of a sudden, all I can think about is what do I do next? How am I going to sell this book? Who am I going to talk to about this book? How am I going to distribute this book? And then you try to, then you enter these, you enter it as for potential awards. And actually the book has won 2 awards now, I'm proud to say. And
Wow.
unofficially, we won a 3rd award that I'm not at liberty to announce yet, but I will on the weekend after it's officially on their website, which is amazing. 3 awards in just a few months. So that's very gratifying to me, just getting that recognition. But working backwards, yeah, all these great milestones that I've had with the book, and especially nice reviews is another nice thing. A nice review really makes my day, and that's what I want. I need more reviews because I want more people to find out how good the book is and how deep it is and how touching. And so a nice review really, that makes my day. People holding the book, people buying my book unexpectedly. Those are little milestones that really to keep you going for sure. But yeah, when the book is out and you're looking at it and you're taking pictures of it and taking pictures of people with it, I kept my first coinage, a $100 bill from my first sale, and I've had a foreign sale, so I've got some London quid, some London pounds that I sold a book for that, and a check. It's emotional, and it's for me monumental. And if you asked me about this 5 or 6 years ago, there's no way I would say this is what I'm going to be doing the rest of my life. I would never have guessed that I would have done this. But my mom and dad back in the 70s did this, probably knowing that I would probably repeat the stories back and do this. And I guess my parents know me better than I know myself. They had some kind of an intuition, and they were right. Even posthumously, gosh darn it, you were right. And I could see my mom's Jewish guilt. I could see my mom just saying, "Why didn't you do this while you were still alive?" I could still, so everybody says, well, they're proud of you and they're looking down on you and happy you did this. And I hope that's the case, because there were times I was burnt out of it and disinterested and saturated. I've heard the term Holocaust fatigue, syndrome of children of Holocaust survivors. And I've over the years, I've heard people talk about it in their own experiences, and some people worse than others, and some people who couldn't share their stories as much as others. We hear that a lot about Vietnam vets, the ones that some share and some just don't want to, because it's just the events are so horrific, and you just want to put it away. So yeah, so it's a lot of charges, it's a lot of emotion. It comes and goes, sadness, happiness, tears. When I do my speech, it's sort of like doing my dad's eulogy again. It's more about the book itself, but it's hard because it's very emotionally charged, and I don't get as nervous talking in front of people as I used to, because I'm sort of getting acclimated to that now. But my biggest fear when I do a talk is getting too emotional about it. It's just, when I was talking about my grandson at the Holocaust Museum, I just, boom, it hit me, got a zap, and that's hard to control, but it's part of it. And so I hope that never goes away, because it sure helps the effectiveness of sharing the story and realizing how meaningful it is and how important the stories are to share.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And you talked about the the emotions that you've had. For instance, when you read a review, when your grandson sent you that picture, and I can just imagine that sense of emotion also filled with pride. And I do believe, and I really do believe, that your parents are looking down on you right now and are so thankful and blessed and grateful that you're not only sharing, you've not only shared this experience with your family, but now with the world. And I just want to say congratulations on the 3 awards. Can't wait to find out what the 3rd award is. That is absolutely inspiring. And I'm so honored to have met you, to have read your book, to really maybe in a small way have gotten to know your family through their sacrifices, and that their story will continue to inspire others. Dr. Wolf, before we sign off, where can our viewers and listeners connect with you further?
Well, I want to say, since you're proud to know me, the feeling is very mutual. I'm very proud and privileged to have you invite me to your show. I hope there's quite a few more down the road, so we can help spread the word. Although this was a fantastic show, I look forward to watching it again and sharing it with my friends and others on social media, and hopefully people that I don't know. But yeah, the book is available on Amazon. I send a link just about every day. I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I've got a Facebook author page, and I've got my email and my website. My website is robertjwolfmd.com. If you want to see more about the history of Hungary during the wars, a lot of photos. I've had a lot of TV interviews that are there, some podcasts, a radio interview. And I have a YouTube channel as well that has pretty much the same content. So you can find out a lot more about it. Some of the TV interviews were excellent. Actually, they all were excellent. I mean, but it's a couple were live in studio here in Miami and Tampa Bay. I've got one in Michigan coming up before my Michigan talk. That's I think that's August 28th, I believe. It'll be aired that day. And my book talk in Michigan is September 7th. The book will be available at the book talk. So the Illinois Holocaust Museum talk on August 31st. The book's for sale there already. You can purchase the book in advance. It's also, like I said, on sale at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. It's available at several Barnes and Nobles scattered throughout the country, including Massachusetts, which is, I've lived half my life in New England, which is very pleasing. A few in California, Southern California, and a few here in Florida. Hopefully more to come, but you can walk into any Barnes and Noble, any bookstore, and you can ask about Not a Real Enemy or ask about Robert J. Wolf, MD, and it'll come up, and you can order the book, and they'll deliver it to your home if you'd like. And but the easiest is Amazon. It's a click away. You get on Amazon, you look up Not a Real Enemy, or you find my link, and that's kind of the way to go. But a lot of places. Go to your favorite store, ask, and seek, and you shall receive.
Absolutely. And of course, if you do purchase the book, which you've got to read this book, I'm telling you, this is absolutely fascinating book to read. Please don't forget to leave a review. This book is that good. Dr. Wolf, I can't thank you enough for being here today. And
thank you. Appreciate that. I appreciate it. And one last thing to add is to 10% of my author proceeds are being donated to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. And that's an ongoing thing. So even that's in my trust, my will, and hopefully we get a lot of money sent to the Holocaust Museum to continue the education from their end as well. So, but I'm very grateful for the time, and thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Well, everyone, again, I want to show Dr. Wolf's book along with Janice Harper. Janice, you spell it incorrectly. No, just kidding. I digress a little bit. Got to throw a funny in there every now and then.
Janice is amazing. Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Lisbeth, and the whole team. I got a whole little army of people helping me with every little bit of it. So thank you to the team. Fantastic people, the best.
No doubt. And remember, if you have a story to share, or perhaps you're in the process of writing a book, perhaps you have a book, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to go to my website and register as a guest. My name is Janice, the host of Stories That Inspire Us, the author series. I was truly inspired by my guests.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye for now. Have a great day.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Good interview. Thank you.